So,
I'm creating all sorts of Lincoln Park, kind of coming that way. Because as I come from my house,
so we'll just wait a few minutes.
and we'll wait at these little things.
Go for the questions.
Yeah. So, looks like the other day this is taking us a little longer.
It's going to be fun. I know. Although we did sign the contracts with DWW. So they did all that. Yeah, I did that. It was wonderful. That was super helpful, and he's been filling in a lot of gaps that should come in. Jeff should be helping facilitate, but he's just with the contract. I appreciate it. He's got a heart for this, and I've seen it. Or it's not. It's really exciting about this. They want to be part of something that too.
Good evening. Welcome to our Savior's Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Liz Davis, serving here. We are so glad you came out tonight in this increasingly gross weather to learn more about and from our community members. In this space, we honor each other's stories, and I ask for your openness to receive the gift of wisdom from those who share tonight. Make room within yourself for growth, to be challenged and changed. We invite you to tend to your needs throughout the night. A single bathroom is located behind me in the hallway that you would have walked by. There's a single bathroom there, or down the stairs and below us are additional bathrooms. There will be a break tonight for personal needs. If you find yourself having a difficult time with anything being shared, you're welcome to take a break. If you'd like a pastoral presence for conversation or prayer, you can walk by and tap me. I'll be on the side over there. Tonight is part of an educational series hosted by Stepping On Up. So while our Saviors is excited to be exploring a partnership, to be a positive partner in our neighbors' reentry process, that project is not the focus for this evening. Let us ask God's blessing on our time together. We pray. God, in Jesus, you show your great faithfulness to us. You restored community by bringing into the circle those who were cast out. Teach us to likewise restore our communities. Teach us to honor each person as your beloved one, created in the image of God. Amen. It's my privilege to welcome you all our speakers, and Joel Kilgore, the project organizer, was stepping on up for further introductions.
Well, thank you, Pastor Liz, and thank you for the Our Savior's community for hosting this event, and to all of you who came out tonight to listen and to learn. I recognize some neighbors here, so welcome back. We've had some hearty neighbor conversations the last few weeks about an exciting project that we're proposing for this space. And as Pastor Liz said, tonight is the time to focus on the stories of people with lived experience of reentry. But if people are interested in learning more about that project or have further questions, I'm going to be available during the break and after the program to answer those questions over by the registration table. So feel free to come over and ask away. But tonight I really want to focus our time on our presenters today. I'm here just to give you a little bit of background about Stepping On Up. How many people are familiar with Stepping On Up? Okay, a lot of folks, a few folks not. So briefly, because I'm not the most important person tonight, but we all know that we're in a really serious bind in this community with housing. This is one of the top issues facing Duluth. It's one of the top issues facing our region, and frankly, it's one of the top issues facing this country. For decades now, we have neglected our housing stock and the availability of affordable housing. And we've gotten ourselves in quite a predicament where there is simply not enough housing that's affordable to people. In Duluth, over half of renters are paying more than they can afford for rent. In our housing world, we call that cost burdened, and it's been very depressing to see that number tick upwards over the years. I'm sure some of you have all experienced that lack of housing and lack of affordable housing. On the extreme end, what happens is not only can people not afford housing, but they can't even find a unit. And for people who are facing barriers such as a felony conviction, a disability, limited income, finding that housing is even harder. And so we've seen an uptick in the number of people living on the streets and in shelters, couch hopping with their families and friends. It's really an untenable situation, and it has a negative consequence for our community at large, and also for those individuals who are suffering housing instability. The good news is that we are starting to make some progress. In the last few years, the city and the county have really started taking the housing issue very seriously, and there are more units that have been built in the last few years than there have been in many, many years prior. But we have a long way to go to solve this problem. Stepping On Up is a coalition of the city and the county and nonprofit organizations that are working to address the housing needs of people who have the most to lose. For a while, Duluth was focusing a lot on housing for people who had more options. So you look at buildings like ND, right, for young professionals. And you know what? There is a need for housing across the spectrum. But to focus our energy on that population has been a failed strategy. Our hope, or the hope of city leaders for a long time, is that by building that housing, it would trickle down and benefit the rest of us. And that just hasn't happened. So Stepping On Up is focusing on the needs of the people who have the most to lose. Folks on very limited incomes, folks who are at risk not just of not having the exact apartment that they want, but not having anywhere to live at all. We are moving quickly to develop new housing and shelter opportunities for people in our community. And over the next 5 years, we plan to add 300 new units specifically for that population of very low-income Duluthians. And one of those projects that we're exploring is right here at Our Saviors. So tonight we want to focus on the needs of one of the populations, our first target populations for this new housing opportunity. And I'm really grateful for you all coming out, listening, and learning. I wish I could say that there was an easy solution to homelessness and housing insecurity. It is a fairly straightforward solution, we just need to build more. But it takes time, and there isn't any one agency or unit of government or elected official that can fix it on their own. And even together, we're struggling. And so this is going to have to be an all-in community effort. And we're really excited about the presence of the faith community and the business community and other sectors helping us find a solution, because it's going to take all of us. So thank you again for being here tonight. At the registration table, there is a QR code for the Stepping On Up website if you want to check that out and learn more about upcoming volunteer opportunities and educational opportunities. But now I'm going to turn this over to Jared Wilder, who's our AmeriCorps Vista volunteer. Came here all the way from Georgia to spend a year in Duluth working with Stepping On Up. So welcome, Jared.
Thank you very much. Well, like Joel said, my name is Jared Wilder. I'm the AmeriCorps Vista working with Chum and Stepping On Up. And I will be your host for the night and also asking questions to our panelists. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a bit of the order of events. I don't know if everyone saw the agenda sheets up front, but I can go over a bit of what we're going to do. So we have our introduction and welcome, which was from Pastor Liz and Joel, and then our presentation and panelists, which it does have my name on there, but I'm actually going to have someone else come up and do the presentation. Then after that, we will discuss, or our panelists will discuss their experiences with reentry, and then we'll have our break. After the break, we'll have our Q&A session, and that will be done. We have volunteers, thank you for coming out, and they will pass around like those pens and notepads that are up here for people to write their questions down. During the break, we'll collect them and then bring them back up here for review, and then during the Q&A, we will talk about and discuss those questions. And let me make sure that was all. And then after that, it closes. So I think that is everything. And I guess if we can get the PowerPoint slide up, that would be awesome. And I would like to, I guess, both introduce and invite up Jason Beckman, oh God, I forgot your position, the program director at SOAR Career Solutions.
I'm going to just walk through a real quick 10,000-foot view of what reentry is from a national level, just to kind of ground us into why this is important work. I'm going to start my timer, Joel, for 3 minutes, so I won't go too long. Next slide, please. So you can read reentry is the process by which a person in correctional confinement prepares for release and transitions back into the community. We can view reentry process on a continuum ranging from risk and needs assessment at intake, programming, treatment, and educational attainment during incarceration, case planning for release, and post-release supervision and reintegration. We'll be working on the very last word of that whole thing, the reintegration part. The rest of that is going to be the DOC and the other people that we don't have direct control of here locally. Next slide, please. What is recidivism? It's the tendency of a convicted criminal to reoffend. A lot of people have heard of the revolving door of prison, people coming out and going back. That's where reentry tries to interrupt that cycle. So the people who come out oftentimes are down on their resources. They don't have a lot of connections, and so they go back to what they know, kind of what got them in prison in the first place, and it just becomes a cycle. If you're looking at recidivism data, it's important to know what they're counting and how long. So that's just kind of a nerdy data point there for folks. State prisoner recidivism rates are around 68% for rearrest within the first 3 years of release. So we know that that's too high. That means more people than not are going back. Next slide, please. The 5 aspects of the reentry programming, this is from the National Institute of Justice. Programs and services should be tailored to the unique needs of the individual. So again, we have identified the need for housing in this time between getting out and getting your feet underneath you as a need for this population. Support services should be holistic in nature. As you know, or if you haven't heard, the Stepping On Up project is very widespread. There's agencies from all types of disciplines coming together to support individuals who are going to be in it. Number 3 is cognitive behavioral therapy benefits. This is part of the programming side, so I can tell you that those things will be integrated into the programming that the individuals living in the program would receive. And community supervision works best when it includes robust support functions. That would be, again, this consortium of people who are here to do community support for reentering individuals. And then number 5 says we must employ more nuanced measures of recidivism that present the individual as a whole, and that's part of what we're doing here tonight. We're going to try to talk about individuals who are coming out instead of a group of people that we refer to as inmates or prisoners or whatever kind of derogatory terms we have. Next slide, please. The importance of reentry in the community, it says that when a person returns to society, their ability to find useful work, find suitable housing, and obtain the necessary skills and education determines their chances of becoming a productive member of society. That seems pretty self-explanatory, but the National Institute of Justice thought it was important enough to put it up on their front of their website, and so I figured I'd share it with you guys as well. All of these act as pillars to restore stability to a person's life, and again, from a programming standpoint, we try to introduce these things into that program. Next slide, please. Is that it? No? There we go. So who needs reentry services? Currently in the state of Minnesota, there's almost 10,000 people just in the State Department of Corrections. 95% of those people are going to be getting out of prison. So everybody who's in prison should be in part of that reentry process that we just defined earlier on, where it starts at intake of the prison, through their time there, and then through release. 66 prisoners were living in poverty before incarceration. They did not have the network and the ability to be in a stable lifestyle when they went in. So why would we anticipate that they'll jump right into that when they get out? It's kind of a fool's assumption. 54% of inmates reported a mental health concern at intake. That number rises based on the number of years people are incarcerated. So people who have been incarcerated 10 years have a higher proportion of people than only 3 years. People at 20 years have a much higher proportion than the others. Next slide, please. At the SOAR reentry program, we work with volunteers who want to interrupt that cycle that I was talking about. So we do intakes with people who want to come into the program. This is just a generic breakdown of the demographics of who we're serving. If you want more information about that, you can definitely come and talk to me at the break or afterwards. And one more slide, I believe. And then conclusion is, we want to increase people's employment so they can be self-sufficient. We want to decrease their homelessness so that they can have a better life and better health. We want to, that's the improved health, and then improve public safety. A lot of concerns we've heard about housing people coming out of prison is public safety, but all of the research on reentry programs show that one of the biggest benefits of them is increased public safety and a decrease in the petty crimes that people do to get by. So thank you for your time. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of what reentry is, and we'll take it off with the panelists. Thanks, Jared.
All right, before I introduce the speakers, I did just want to remind myself and everyone that this event is being live streamed, so I'm not sure exactly where the camera is. Wait, where is it? You're pointing. It is on the projector, okay. Thank you all for coming out then. If you do want to ask questions, then you can leave those in the chat and then we'll get to those. But next up, I will introduce our panelists. So we'll start over here from, I guess, this corner of the table. We have Richard Howell. He is, well, for one, a great motivational speaker, but he wants to provide a way for people coming out of incarceration to help themselves through their problems and help them with that first step by providing rental histories to people, providing community and a sense of success and independence are his top priorities. He also is a well-known speaker throughout Duluth with lived experience and years of work history with the formerly incarcerated. So thank you, Richard. Next, we have Devin Wallace, and she is the program supervisor at the Northeast Regional Correction Center, also known as NERC. And before her current position, she was a caseworker at NERC and then a probation officer in the Duluth courthouse. And in both roles, she has facilitated reentry planning for clients under her supervision. So thank you, Devin. Next, we have Jess Nicola. She is a peer recovery specialist and the program coordinator for the Substance Use and Response Team, also known as CERT, out of Duluth, Minnesota. CERT is an entirely peer recovery run and led division and deflection program housed within the Duluth Police Department, serving 3 counties in Minnesota, as well as the city of Superior in Wisconsin. So thank you, Jess. Last but not least, we have Cynthia Finley. She is a reentry case manager at SOAR Career Solutions, and she's been in the field she's been in this field in the community for a long time. She's been at SOAR for 7 years, and she has a bachelor's in communications and in sociology, and is currently near completion of her mediation certification. So with that being said, we will start with our general discussion. Thank you, Cynthia. And who wants to go first, actually? Richard volunteered. Oh, so it sounds like Richard wants to go first.
My name, Richard Howell. Thank you all for having me tonight. One of the most profound things I've come to realize in life, that there is a life outside of drugs, alcohol, all all the things that we fight for now for the survival of those that are getting released from prison. I am one of those individuals that did prison. One of the things that I did that was the worst in my life was destroying the fabric of the community. I'm also a drug dealer. You want me to talk louder? Ooh. Oh, I thought y'all can hear me. I'm sorry. Want me to start over? Yes. My name is Richard Howard. I'm here today. I've always wanted to give back to the community. One of the things that I did that was the worst in my life was selling drugs. Not only did I sell drugs, but I was the main consumer of them. I destroyed a lot of families. I separated myself from God and everything else in my family. Until I went to prison, I had a profound vision while I was there that there's more to life than just this. When I was released, I went to the Damiano to do community service. That's where I met Cynthia Finley. She gives her heart to what she does in this community. I was one of the recipients of being, they say it's not discriminating, but having a felony background, I was not allowed adequate housing. They wanted me to live in the chum or some unforgotten place that was going to make me go back to where I was, but I was determined not to do that. So I met Steve O'Neill, and he gave me some ideas, and I started my Housing Families program. But before that, Miss Finley was willing to sign for me to get an apartment. And that was so prestigious of her, because the thing was, she was the only one that believed in me at the time. I was very insecure and unsettled. So that helped me to see a better perspective in life. So after that, I became more confident in myself. I went to a class called Health Realization, Thinking for a Change. It allowed me to face all the demons that I had in me, and one of the most disheartening feelings that I had, my mother passed when I was 17, and I couldn't understand it. I felt betrayed, and I felt abandoned, so I set vengeance upon the world, not knowing that the only life I was destroying was my own. Once I've had this insight of change, I wanted to give back. So I volunteered 3 years at the Damiano Center, giving back to the community. Everyone that knew me came up and was continuously asking me, am I still selling dope, joke? Am I still in the game? And I'm like, no, my life has changed. It's not about me being self-righteous or spiritual to the point that I was a preacher preaching the gospel, but I was preaching a new profound life that could be attainable by anyone that was given that chance. We sit up and we look at people and we judge them every day, not really knowing their hearts or what they're struggling with. One of the most intriguing things that I've had to deal with was getting to know me. I had lost entire perspective on who I really was. I was a people pleaser, but I didn't know how to please myself. So I was lost, dysfunctional, and I don't know. It's emotional for me to tell this story simply because now the people I surround myself with are go-getters. I have a collaboration with SOAR. I have a collaboration with probation, parole, the police department, and everyone else. I don't run and hide anymore. I stand out in the light. I'm not ashamed of my past because it's propelling me to have a better future. Today is one of those honorable days to be able to sit in front of people and say, yeah, this is what I did, but this is what I'm doing. And I don't feel like you can judge me because I really don't care. You know, the caring is me caring about me and what I'm doing. One of the things that I've learned in life was that it doesn't take much to enjoy the simplest of things in life. Watching the birds fly, watching the grass grow, or the river go by. My name is Richard Howland. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I I've had the privilege of serving this community for 10 years in various roles and being able to be on someone's side when they've needed it the most. Originally, when I came back to this community, I was a therapist. I went to grad school and got a master's in clinical mental health. And after 2 years of serving in that capacity, unfortunately, came right to my face that the criminal justice world is where a lot of our mental health services are being pushed to, and we're criminalizing mental health, and I took a position as a caseworker up at NERC. NERC is a pretty amazing place. And while people are serving their sentence by the court or being held while they're waiting to figure out what's happening in the court system, we give people the opportunity to learn how to do things differently. We don't require them to, it's up to them. It's their life, not mine. But we allow the space for them to try things out if they wish to. And I'm very privileged to be able to do that. I transitioned from a caseworker position to working in probation. And initially, I did all of our pretrial screenings, meeting people in those first 48 to 72 hours after an arrest when they are in probably some of the lowest moments of what's happening. Not always feeling so great, not having any idea what's gonna happen, about to walk in front of a judge and they have to see me. No one I've worked with in the last 8 years that I've worked for ARC has really wanted to have to work with me, right? But I, again, find myself privileged to be able to be there and help folks through that process because we're talking about members of our community. These are the people I sit with in the hallways for parent-teacher conferences. I'm at baseball games in Little League with the folks who are sentenced to serve time with me. They're friends of family. They are friends of my coworkers or people's siblings. I, about a year and a half ago, was privileged to get the position as the program supervisor and be back up at NERC, looking at programming, where I collaborate with these three amazing humans up here to bring things to our community for the folks who need them the most. As a caseworker and in probation, some of the most difficult things when I was working with my clients was figuring out where are they going to stay at night so everything else that we are trying to put in place is possible. If folks don't have a place that they can go where they feel safe, they feel like their belongings are safe and their physical person is safe, I can't expect any of the other things that we're asking them to do to be able to take hold. And we know as parents or as aunts and uncles that we need to provide a lot of safety for the young ones in our lives. And we're talking about folks who still need that. We all need community, not just when we're young. And if we want the best chance of success, we need to have that available. It was always so disheartening when we'd have everything set up and then we couldn't get a housing placement, or a background check on a housing placement would come through and they'd decide they weren't gonna take someone because someone in the community could pay market rate or more. Personally, when I moved back here from grad school, we were privileged to be able to buy a house, sight unseen, because it was half the price of what I would pay in rent in Duluth, which is astronomical. It's insane. And it's only gotten worse. And we're talking about folks who have gaps in their employment history, gaps in their housing history, and being able to explain that on an application and get an immediate no before they've ever even been seen or talked to. So we're very privileged to have the resources we do in the community and the collaboration to work with folks and allow people to show us that they can do something differently, because we're all human and we all make mistakes and we all have to believe that our neighbors want to do better. So thanks again for being here.
Hi, I'm Jess Nicola. Thank you. I am a peer recovery specialist and the program coordinator for the substance use response team. If you're not familiar, peer recovery specialists are folks in recovery that use their own recovery journeys to help other people who are struggling with their substance use get into recovery, however that may be. I usually describe it to folks, if you're like familiar with sponsors in 12-step groups, similar to that, but the person that's getting into recovery gets to determine what path they're gonna take. And I just kind of like walk along with them. What's interesting about CERT is that we are a team of people who help folks who are using drugs, and our employer is a police department, which is pretty weird, right? But it's a growing trend across the country. People are really starting to realize the criminal justice system is very badly broken, and we continue to throw tax dollars at punishment to punish people out of, like what Devin talked about, mental health, to punish people out of substance use, to punish people out of homelessness, to punish people out of desperation, and it absolutely does not work. I think about all of the time, I'm kind of like a history buff, I read a lot of nonfiction, and I think about all of the time, like when archaeologists are digging up our society, will they come across the prisons and just be astounded at the way that we treated people? Because it feels medieval. When you really break it down to what we do to someone who has a mental illness or poverty that kind of forces people into criminality, and then we put them in a cage, it's barbaric. But we normalize it, like we all understand prisons, that's how they work, and they need to be safe in there, and we need to be safe from them, so we like kind of get used to it, right? But it's wild to think about. What I also thought I was going to be a therapist, and then when I decided I couldn't be a therapist was when I realized how much I love people who use drugs and have been involved in the criminal justice system. I love them. They are some of the most kind, compassionate, thoughtful, community-driven people I've ever met. And the idea of giving therapy and listening to normal people problems bores me to death. I can't imagine it. Because I love these folks. And I think one of the things that we're missing when we have conversations about the criminal justice system is exactly what Richard gave, where it's stories. Stories are what's powerful. And when I used to work at SOAR, which you'll hear more from them, and I would meet people who were coming out of incarceration, you see their charge and you're like, ooh, this is probably gonna be somebody who's like this and this and this and this. And then you meet them and you sit down and you have that first intake and they tell you their story, how they got to the point they were at, and you go, of course you did. Of course you did. There was no other way out. It makes complete sense. From the beginning to the end, there isn't a point out of place. Of course this is the journey that you took. One of the things that's unique about Duluth is that we have almost everything that we need. In my job, I help a lot of other cities and police departments try to create similar programs because we're not unique. Like every other city across the country is dealing with vast increases in substance use disorder, untreated mental illness, homelessness. We're not the only ones. And I was talking to these folks in a police department in Myrtle Beach, which is not in Florida. I didn't know that. I told my husband, I'm meeting with people in Myrtle Beach today. I was like, but don't worry, I'm not flying to Florida. And he goes, I hope not, because that's not in Florida. It was a Zoom meeting. But I was meeting with them, and they wanted to talk about, how do you help folks and keep a volunteer program with people who are, court appointed? They have to do certain things. And I'm trying to help them and kind of get the lay of the land of what's happening in Myrtle Beach, not Florida. And I realized they don't have anything. They don't have withdrawal management. They don't have walk-in comprehensive assessments all over the place. They don't have treatment centers. They have nothing. And I'm like, well, how do you help anybody if you don't have like this infrastructure? We have everything we need but a place to stay. It's literally that simple. We have everything we need but places for people to stay. I wish I could compile a list of every person I've worked with. It's hundreds. Who we can go, yes, we're gonna get you into treatment, and we got you an assessment, and we got you a therapist, and you got your DA, and we got you on meds same day. Because we can do that here in Duluth. We have the infrastructure. And they go, yeah, we got it all. And a week later, they're back on the street, they've used, they stopped taking their meds, all of that, because they didn't have somewhere safe to stay. That's it. That's the catalyst. That's all we need. And the more you get into the criminal justice system and our social supports around people who have involvement, the more frustrating it gets, because we solved this problem a long time ago. We know what works. We know treating people while they're incarcerated, getting them access to high-skill, high-wage employment, getting them connected with their families and social supports and people that love them, and giving them a safe place to live, and they will never go back to prison, ever. They never will. But we don't do it because it's a philosophy. We as a country have a philosophy that if you screw up, you deserve to get punished. And that punishment deserves to follow you for as long as it takes for you to become a better person. And it's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy. How can they become? We prove it because they don't become better people, they just go back to prison. But it's because we didn't give them the support they need, so we just kind of stick in this mentality decade after decade after decade after decade, and absolutely nothing changes. Until we all agree, okay, we tried the punishment thing, let's give something else a shot. Nothing is gonna change, nothing. Thank you.
Good evening. Happy Thursday. Thank you. I didn't want to be. So my name is Cynthia Finley, and I work at SOAR. I've been there for about 7 years. I'm a reentry case manager there, but I'm not new to this community. I've been in the helping field for about 20 years in various roles. And this is by far the hardest one to do. Because the people that are coming out tell me stories that are awful. They tell me stories about how they had hope and now it's gone. And these are stories that happened in the last couple of weeks. So for example, I currently have a man who's 59 years old. He's got some significant work history. He doesn't have very much, in his mind, criminal history, because all I did was drink. All I did was get a DWI. And as a culture that wants to hand you a drink at every celebration, right, you know, that's all he got in trouble for. But now he's out, and he's living in his car, and he's trying to find a job, and it's getting cold, and he's worried that his agent is going to send him back to prison. That was his week. So I'm not here to bring you down, but I am here to remind you that there are other humans in our community that have it much worse than all of us sitting here, who have much different concerns, who have a little bit of a chance at some hope, because like all of these folks have told you, we have some great resources in our community, but you can't access any of them, you can't hold on to any of them, and you can't move forward with any of them if you don't have a safe place to land at night. So one of my job is to go into prison facilities and meet with people before they get out. And that's, I try to do it, you know, anywhere before that, you know, 6 months to 2 months before they get out. It doesn't always work that way. prison facilities, everything's pretty regimented. You have to be, there's a set time that you can go do that kind of stuff. But while I'm there, I'm doing an intake, and I'm trying to find out what's going on. How'd you get here? How long? That's really important to know. Some people have been gone so long that phones were still on the wall with cords. It was never my job to teach someone technology, but it has become my job to help people navigate technology. I should put that on my resume. Right? As I'm using my phone as an example. I'm sending emails to people across the desk from me. People find it very hard to understand that they can't just walk into a building and ask for a paper application anymore, because that's the way it was when they left. And to try and explain in just a meeting how much things have changed and what they will have to adjust to, I don't have enough time for some of that, right? I only have so much time, and so my job is to try and find out, you're here, and what can I do for you, and how can I help you when you get out? What are your needs going to be? What's been in your history? And I can tell you 99.5% of my folks have lots of childhood trauma. They have lots of chemical health issues, lots of physical health issues, lots of family fabric breakdowns, lots of periods of homelessness in their past. And like Jess said, of course you ended up here. Just simply nowhere else you were going to land. And so it's my job then to try and figure out, like, so what are we going to work on when you get home, right? What are going to be your challenges? And there's a lot of them, but housing is by far and large the biggest, right? Every single person comes out with, it seems like a mental health diagnosis, even if they didn't really have one. They have one now, right? Prison is a system that needs to be endured. And then when you come back to our community, all of a sudden, you don't know the rules anymore. Someone changed the rules while you were gone. And no one gave you the handbook. So it's my job to help people navigate all this, right? And so Richard told you a great story about how when we first met or when we got to know each other, what was great was when I worked at that job, I knew a lot of landlords. I knew landlords that were willing to give people a chance. I knew that my word meant something to some landlords, right? I can't tell you that today. However many years ago that was, Richard, I don't have a single landlord in my back pocket anymore. They're all gone. The landlords that would look someone in the eye and look past their background and give them a chance are gone. They've been replaced by companies and corporations that have rules and background checks and processing fees, right? That's what we have instead, and it's really hard to navigate those systems. I could tell you a lot of stories. I could tell you a lot of successes. Right? I have a gentleman who in 5 years went from being gone in prison for 12, he was gone for 12 years, gets out, got a job working at McDonald's. He took our CDL course with some significant help, passed, and is now working for a local garbage truck company and owns his own home through one roof. It's possible, but he had supports. Can we give that guy some snaps? It's possible. But those stories are not my top stories, and I wish they were. So SOAR is an employment agency, and so that's what I tell people when I go to see them. We're here to help you try and find stability. One of the two biggest ways to find stability is housing and employment, right? I can get you a survival job any day, all day, right? We know everyone's hiring. But I don't want you to have a survival job. I want you to have the beginnings of a career. I want you to have a chance to make some money. I want you to have a chance at home ownership. I want you to have a chance at a life that's far different than what you've known before. And SOAR does that. We do that all the time. We've done it for several decades. But I think we have to give people a chance. I got really lucky last month. For the first time in a really long time. I get in the habit of scrolling through Facebook, you know, and I'm always on the marketplace. I'm always looking for apartments. I'm always looking for my people, right? And there was at that moment, that day, the gods all aligned. There was a person across the desk from me. He had been staying at Chum. He's working at Goodwill. So his wages aren't high, but he really doesn't have any stability. He's been out of prison for 2 months and he's living at Chum and he doesn't have any stability. And the only times that we could meet were on Tuesdays when we were open late for about a half an hour. And one day I got lucky. Someone had posted a room for rent in somewhere in this neighborhood. That room was $675 for a bedroom in someone's home. I asked him if he wanted me to respond, and he said yes. Turns out this person is a Facebook friend of mine, and I'm sure we all have Facebook friends that were not BFFs, right? I couldn't tell you the last time I had an actual conversation with that human, but the next day he reached back to me and asked me if I knew about him, what I knew about him. And all I said was, he's a person who's looking for a new start. He gave him a chance. But that's the first time that's happened to me in 3 years. When I used to be on a pretty regular basis. We have to get better at humanizing folks. One of the things that I do when I go to do an intake is I intentionally do not look at their background and I don't look at their charges because I want to get to know the person in front of me. I want to meet the human in front of me. And then I do an intake. I hear a lot of information. I get back to my desk, and then I have to create a narrative as part of my work process. And now I'm looking at your background. Sometimes it's not quite what we talked about. Some people are not ready to quite tell me all the dirty details, and that's okay. But I like that I get to meet them first before I get to judge them, because it helps me work with them better. So, takeaways would be, we need projects in our community that help house folks that need another chance. And we can all be part of that. So, thank you.
All right, so before we get into our break and the actual Q&A, I have a few questions for the panelists in general. Also, can everyone hear me? I'm sorry, I am like sitting down behind a desk, or behind a laptop. So I guess I have one for the panelists in general, and this one is, I guess, what benefits are people missing out on when we don't have, or I guess, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, when we don't get people coming out of reentry and coming back into our community and living with us and living around us, what are we missing out on as a community? Or, yeah. And then if anyone wants to think about that, I can pass the mic.
One, we're missing out on really valuable employees. There's a whole bunch of research and evidence that proves that when people come out of incarceration, they're more likely to stay longer at their first job out of incarceration than a normal employee, someone who didn't come out of incarceration. They're extremely valuable employees. They're very dedicated to the things that they acquire once they get out. They like to take really good care of their stuff because they haven't had stuff in like a really long time. I also think the stories, like we talked about earlier, being able to hear from folks different than you is so unbelievably valuable. And when we push all of those folks like into exile almost, we miss out on so much of that human story that we would hear if we brought them in.
I think a big piece for me, and again, my background in mental health, I worked with children, particularly middle schoolers. And when we have folks who are from our community, want to re-enter in our community, and don't have the opportunity to or the access to, we also run the risk of perpetuating this for generations. We have folks who can't reunite with their children in person, who can't rebuild those relationships. And when you look at things like adverse childhood experiences and trauma and breaking those generational cycles, we have to do that here. Or we're not going to end this the way that we can. And I agree with, we are just missing out on some pretty fabulous humans, because the folks that we work with are fabulous human beings who have amazing stories outside of what this piece of paper looks like. And we have folks with a culture and a connection to our community who want to be here. And as a community that's got some pretty big university institutions, so some transientness with students, and in the summer we're a ton of visitors and tourists, we need to continue to build what our community is and who stays here and lives here. And when folks want to be here, we need to capitalize on that.
Let's see, I have a few more. Since we have a bit of time before the break, everybody went a little fast, so that worked for me. Let's see. So I guess I can ask about what the community in general, or this is also for all of the panelists, what the community can do in general to help support our neighbors and family members who are re-entering from incarceration.
Let me make sure I understood that. What we can do when they re-enter?
Yeah, so the general community.
Well, one of the most receptive things we can do is look at them like human beings. You know, we judge them, and this is in most instances, from my experience. When a person is released from prison, this piece of paper beats them back to their community. And the person that's looking at this piece of paper has the power of God. He literally judges them. Now, if we can just discard this paper just for a moment and see if that person is receptive enough to change, then I think that individual should be given every opportunity. One of the main things that I keep hearing is, how do we stop recidivism? Lower the bar. Make it available to individuals, not deprive them of it. The housing portion is a key component. Most people that's being released from prison, they separated from their families. When they on parole or probation and they call a parole officer and say, listen, I need to go and see my kid, he's sick, they say, well, you wait till we respond. And if they don't respond and your kid is suffering, in that person's mind, he needs to save his child. Is it right? No, it's not. But the thing is, make it easier communication. Communication is key to all the survivors of people coming back into prison, because they still have mental health issues, they still have addictions, they still have separation issues, abandonment issues. If we can lower that standard a little bit, I think it'd be more communicative to them. I think we stand a better chance.
We need to stop looking for people doing things wrong. It's really easy to catch people doing things wrong. I guarantee there's people in this room that were on a cell phone while they were driving, or speeding, or any number of things that are technically violating a law. So we can do that. We can find the bad. It's not hard. But we talked before the panel started, when we celebrate successes and we find the things that people are doing well, the folks we're working with, they are their own worst critics. They're not gonna find the things they did well, and when they do things well, they're gonna find every reason that they don't deserve to get the credit for that success. Because they don't believe that they do. And sometimes we need to believe harder for them until they learn that that's true. So if there's one takeaway from me, it's they're someone's family, and we need to prove to them that we believe in them.
I did hear someone clapping. If you want to clap louder, you can. Okay. So I do have a good bit of questions, and I'm in a weird spot right now. So we have about 3 minutes left until our break, and I don't know. Okay. If everyone wants to take a break now, what we'll do is we'll take about, we'll do about a 5-minute break. And for people who want to write down their questions, we have our lovely volunteers who will be coming around with the sheets and the pens. For people online, you can also write your questions, and then I'll go back there and check out all the questions. I'll figure it out. Everyone else, this is also a time to maybe get some more snacks and refreshments, and also use the restroom if you can. Oh, and one last thing, if you did not sign in at the front desk, then if you could come up and do that, that'd be amazing. I was gonna say, I don't think you have to. Yes. So, if you find me. Oh, that'll work. And I'll add that. So we had 5 for the break in general, but once we start back, I can ask some of my questions. Well, that's on there. We did change it, so I'm sorry about that.
Anyway,
But
can you give us 5 to 3:30 so you can?
oh yeah, you have time because I'm gonna ask some questions myself.
Okay.
So then,
All right, I'll
before
try
you-
to, like, because I want to make sure.
that'll be awesome. All right. Well, it looks like most of us are back from break, and we have our volunteers sorting through some of the questions for the panelists. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my seat, and I still have a few questions that I wanted to ask on my own before we get to yours, but we will be getting to yours shortly. So bear with us. Thank you. I guess since we didn't get to that, if anyone on the panel had a question for another panelist, you could think of one and throw one out there. Lucky chance to have fun.
I'll use the mic, although I can be loud enough. One of the things that makes us so lucky in the roles that we're in is our relationship to each other. Because I can pick up my cell phone and I can call Jess and get something finished and taken care of because I'm in the system, I'm a systems person who just happens to have those right connections. Or we can email Cynthia and she can be there in a minute. And we forget that the folks that we're working with don't necessarily have that. So we get to know each other pretty well, at least professionally, to be able to do those things. And we expect other folks to just walk randomly into a building to a person they've never met or a building they've been in and have some sort of follow through. I don't know about you, but that's hard for me. So, you know, we can help people get things done, but the more that we bridge community and that you guys as community members know who your resources are if you've got somebody around you, the better off we're all going to be.
Thank you. So I have another question. Never mind, I'll switch to another question. Not that that one's bad, but I feel like it's been answered before, and I don't want to necessarily repeat. So, oh, I'm sorry. I was telling them that I was going to change the question that I originally had to something else. So, this new question, oh, we do have new questions. You can come and bring them up. I'm going to ask this one, and then we'll go on. So, how long should punishment be? I know we talked about
people coming out of incarceration and doing their time essentially. But, you know, when they get out, they're still having issues and essentially being punished. And so just a general, probably quicker question would be, how long should that punishment be? When should it end, essentially?
I think that question was already answered by the courts, legally. But as a society, I would say we have a much shorter tolerance, right? We have already decided that you are a bad person and you carry a lot of risk, and I should be scared and nervous around you, when none of those things are really true. But we believe that because we've been conditioned to believe that. Society and our families and our friends and social media, movies, right? So we get this message all the time that we should still continue to be afraid of someone who has been to prison. And I would say, no, I think that we need to give people a chance. We need to meet them. We need to give them a chance to be community members. And when they walk out the door, it's sort of like Minnesota restoring the right to vote, right? The minute you walk out, you get to vote. The minute you walk out, you shouldn't have the kind of hurdles that you do, but you do. So I would say, we need to get better, or we need to have better systems for segueing from one system to not, right? None of us do any of our transition. Transition is hard, right? We did transitions all the time. Elementary to middle school to high school, into our jobs, into apartment versus home ownership. We are all constantly in a state of flux. And we are constantly in a state of change, but yet this is a segment of the population that we won't allow to change. So I would say, when they're done.
Yeah. You mentioned movies. Jason, you'll like this one. I think about Aladdin a lot. Like a lot. I think about Aladdin 3-4 times a week because Aladdin fascinates me. We all love Aladdin. We watched it as kids. We were like, this Aladdin character is great. Look at this redemption story. He sings a song where it's like, gotta steal to eat, gotta eat to live. And we're all singing that song. And we're like, yay, Aladdin, he gets it. Isn't that interesting? We love Aladdin. We saw what he did. We saw him running around, stealing all this food, causing havoc with his little monkey and stuff. And we were like, you go, Aladdin, because we understood his story. And then Aladdin had the redemption arc, and he found the girl, and all lived happily ever after. You should watch Aladdin. I think that's what we need. We need to all march into the Department of Corrections with a VHS copy of Aladdin, and we need to go, listen to us. So I think the idea that we can punish people out of most types of crime, the vast majority of crime, like poverty necessitates crime. All of these mental health and substance use disorders in a culture that doesn't support but instead shuns necessitates crime. You cannot survive without it. Gotta eat to live, gotta steal to eat. It means you have to. So the idea that we could punish that out of somebody, kind of like when you really take it apart and look at it, it doesn't even make sense in the first place. So I think like, how long does punishment last? Like, when will we feel like you've learned your lesson, Missy? And when will that person have been like, okay, enough lashings, I got it from here, guys. I don't think there is an answer. And I think we've proven over and over again that any length of punishment, I'm talking punishment, doesn't, in the sense that we already do it.
Disney movies are fascinating because that story, the Aristocats, like way before that, how many times do we look at, oh, well, we understand why that person's breaking a rule. Like, okay, we can forgive that person breaking a rule. In my utopia, all things perfect, it wouldn't be up to the community to deal with punishment. They're getting that somewhere else. They've got somebody they've got to go meet. It was me as a probation officer who's going to dig in their business and tell them what to do and be basically a professional parent and handing out consequences, and they've got a judge and attorneys and all these other things that are dealing with that. They're getting that. And I know we've talked a lot about DOC and prison, but we have a significantly higher number of folks that we're working with in the community who are on probation supervision because the court has determined, or the charge that they were convicted of was such that it was determined that they can be in the community with somebody watching over what they're doing and making sure they're following the rules. I guarantee you interacted with a bunch of them today and you probably didn't even know. So they're already doing that. They've got someone who says at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, you're gonna be in my office and you're gonna do X, Y, Z, and you're gonna bring all this stuff. And I'm gonna be in your life. Me as a PO, I was in people's homes. I can drop in anywhere I want, anytime. And I have visited people at their houses at 2 a.m. and woken them up. Because I also got to be the PO for drug court for a while. So really, anything on this piece of paper the court says goes, they're getting their punishment. I don't think that's a community thing. But we feel like we have that power to pass judgment, like has been talked about a lot. There's already people judging, and there's already people making determinations, and someone has decided this is what's gonna happen, and we need to leave that there.
I don't know where I'm at. I'm still on the Latin. The reality is some of those things just don't fit into the scheme of things right now. We'll bang our head up against the wall all day long to live in that fantasy world. Yeah, until you come to reality, the reality is the system was broken a long time ago. It was geared for failure. It was nothing in there that had anything remotely regarding success. If you were convicted of something, that follows you the rest of your life. You're being judged, you're being looked at, and you're being persecuted every day. I've been clean off of drugs since 2006. Woo. I have not reoffended. I've done multiple things to advance myself in life. But if they saw my record, it was, I used to say, oh, my record is not that bad. All it was drugs. But those drugs took lives. Those drugs and the things that happened is all on that paper. Before I enter any room, I let people know this is what I've done. You don't have to try figuring out. You don't have to judge me on that. But for us to sit here and be realistic about trying to change these things, I've never been one for rhetoric. And that's just keep talking about the same thing repeatedly without change. When do we actually implement something that makes sense? That's where I'm at. So when I chose to come on this panel, I chose to come wholeheartedly because that's my sincerity to me. We're not playing no more. This is not about no games or nothing. This is our livelihood. This is my family's livelihood. This is the people across the street from me's livelihood. Every time we start doing something, when do we as felons become productive citizens in the eyes of those that are judging us? It makes no sense to me. When Cynthia said, well, the judge made that decision, yes, he did. And he stamped it on our foreheads and on our back. You're gonna be persecuted to the day you die. I've had my record expunged. To me, that didn't mean nothing because I'm still being judged. I'm still being ridiculed and picked out. I have conversations with all law enforcement, judges, or whatever it is. the thing is, the next one that don't know me is reading this paper. So until that changes, this is what we're gonna be.
So, one, thank you all for answering that question. Again, I thought it was going to be quick. It took a solid almost 20 minutes. Good. Glad I asked it. So the questions are kind of all spread out. I'm trying to figure out the best one to kind of segue into. Let's go with this one. So this one asks, from a random audience member, I'm going to say Neon. They asked, how successful are you in finding jobs for people reintegrating into the community? And I'm assuming this one is just for the panel in general. So,
Well, SOAR is an employment agency, so that is my goal. When I'm meeting with somebody, that's what I'm talking about. That has to be part of their stability plan. You know, like if their plan is to get out, and if their plan doesn't involve employment, I don't think I'm much of a resource. But it's pretty easy for me to get someone a job. I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier. But the problem is the jobs that I can get people easily are survival jobs. And by survival jobs, I mean jobs that pay the McMinimum, as Jason would say. And some of them aren't even paying that. So I referred to a client earlier who's working at Goodwill, and I'm not knocking anyone's wages, but this person is making like $11 an hour. So you can see why he can only afford a bedroom for $675, which is going to take up a good percentage of what he's making. And so it's easy for me to find someone who can work a dishwashing job, a hotel job. So we do a pretty good job in our community of hiring folks sort of like behind the scenes and paying them a pretty low wage also. And we love that. We love to give people an opportunity to get some money in their pockets and figuring out what their next steps are going to be. It's that next level, that next rung, that gets to be a little bit harder, right? Because that often requires some education, or it requires some stability to make that leap. How many times, like if we're thinking about switching jobs, what makes us switch jobs? Are we going for more money? Are we going for better hours? Are we going for because we like the location? Our best friend works there? But you know, like all of those things are stabilizing factors that my people don't have yet. So it's pretty easy to get people a job in the survival kind of world. It's much harder to make that leap out, is what I would say.
I refer to you.
We are in an interesting world with employment because it is harder to find people to work than ever before post-COVID. And so I think, and I'm hopeful, that we're in this turning point where we can't stop seeing the folks that need that resource the most, that need that job the most. And we've actually seen quite a few employers reaching out to us at NERC saying, hey, I'm looking for people and you can let them know I'm looking, and I already know that there's going to be things that show up when we start doing this, which is amazing. And I'm hopeful that that continues because we do have to just be accepting of the fact that people have histories before they walk in our door.
And did anyone else on the panel have anything to say about it? No? Yes. All right. Well, next question. So this one, I believe, is more tailored towards Cynthia and you talking about landlords earlier, but it can also go for the panel in general. So the person asked, you said private landlords no longer participate in housing placements. How many were successful and how many resulted in landlord losses? And I'm assuming that is referring to the people moving in.
That's a harder question for me to sort of answer off the top of my head because I don't have the pulse on every landlord in our community, much to my dismay. I wish I did, right? I mean, I think that some of this could be solved if I could get a bunch of landlords in the room, right? If we can sort of humanize this problem. So I don't really think there's a good answer to this that I have. I mean, if you have community data, maybe. All I know is anecdotal information, and I can tell you that, you know, the ones that have support and that have people believe in them and who are willing to give people a second chance are usually the ones that are successful. People just want to be given a chance. They just want to be given an opportunity to prove themselves. And so I wish I could answer that question on behalf of our community, but I can't. I wish I could tell you that we have a good night, Richard. Where's our, woo! Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have a family emergency.
It's a tough question, and I wish I could answer it with some real data. Jason, can we get on that?
Well, I just mentioned that what is the fund for the landlord that has been used? Talk about that.
Yeah, there used to be what was called, do we still have it? The landlord, it was like a risk mitigation fund. So, yeah, the landlord incentive program. Do we still have it? I'm not sure. So I was on that board once upon a time. And what the premise is that we have a pot of money that sits in our community. And as an advocate, I would say to a landlord, if you take a chance on this person with a background, you have the backup of knowing that this person will be getting case management while they live in your apartment. And if something happens, worst case scenario, and something happens that their damage deposit didn't cover, we have this fund over here that you can tap into. And we will make sure that you have no losses by agreeing to this person, by agreeing to give this person a second chance. And this has been a duplicative pot of money in many cities across our nation. And what we have found out is almost across the board that initial pot of money rarely gets spent. Why? Because they took a chance on someone, that someone usually is pretty positive, that someone usually does pay their rent. Am I saying that there aren't some, people that didn't do what they were supposed to do? Yeah, but that happens with the regular population too. Right? A landlord's taking a risk on anybody. But here what we were trying to do is we were trying to, give them an incentive to their pocketbook, because that's what landlords, they're in business, they're business people. That's what this is for them, this is their living. We can't expect them to house people for free, but we can ask them to take a chance on one of their 10 tenants, right? And that was kind of what we were asking them to do, is just please give someone a chance. So I think when communities have that landlord risk mitigation fund, it works. But the problem is, again, we have a dwindling private landlord population, and those are the ones that we can talk to. Corporations, we can't have that same kind of conversation with. I wish we could. Wouldn't that be fun? But it gets to be a little bit tricky, and I think as our communities grow, we keep talking about this need for housing, and we have had housing built, but how many times is it a big building, right? So yeah, 300 units might have been created, but those are 300 units that must pass the background check, is like the first thing they hear. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's my 2 seconds.
I was also going to say, I also think you answered the question. That is a tough one to add. And a few of them do deal with numbers and statistics, just like these next two. I think the one I'm going to choose is, again, more so dealing with housing. And it says, estimate please, how many people would need a place to stay in a year here in Duluth?
Joel, where are you? 700.
No one has any.
Well, I know the warming shelter last season provided 682 unique individuals with a night of support, so we know there's at least that many people in town.
No, but what about coming out of incarceration? I'm thinking of different housing types.
Oh, sure. So St. Louis County told us a few years ago that about 1,800 people a year are coming back to St. Louis County from incarceration from across the state. That's just state DOC. That's not NERC. That's not St. Louis County Jail. So of those, we only know the 100 we see at SOAR. So I don't have the data for the other 1,700.
Just that number is interesting. Yeah.
And I think it gets harder. Sorry, I'm just gonna be loud. I think it gets harder when you start asking about different types of housing, because then we have to start talking about definitions of homelessness, definitions of unhousing. Because you have people who are coming out of incarceration who are going to a board and lodge. Do we count them? Do not. That's not necessarily there forever, but it's there for now. So do they count? Or if they're staying at mom and dad's couch, do they count? I think it's a much harder and more nebulous idea, and so that's what makes this an even trickier topic to tackle, because we have certain data, but it doesn't necessarily encapsulate exactly what we're looking for, and every person's definition is different.
I'm sure that was good. Let's see what next. I am actually, so Richard did have to leave because of a family emergency, and this would have been a good question regardless. But this person asked, how does a legacy of racism come into play here in Duluth? And then they have it circled at the bottom of the page, the culture of Duluth. And this is for the panelists in general.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate that.
We'll give it time and then. Are you ready?
I just presented on this a while ago. Let me hold up my presentation. I can tell you, Minnesota, not so much just Duluth, but the statistics around racism in our criminal justice system in our liberal state of Minnesota are quite astonishing. Un momento, por favor. Okay. Black Americans are 3.7 times more likely to be arrested. We are 4th in the nation in disparities between white and black incarceration. So like per capita goes. We are top of the list, number 1 in disparities with Native and white incarceration, which is why the Prison Policy Initiative gave the state of Minnesota an F-, which I didn't even know existed, in its prison, parole, and probation policies related to racism in incarceration. Which is really interesting when you think about like Minnesota. I think we see ourselves as very liberal and very progressive, and we're like, yes, everybody, but behind the scenes, we are incarcerating black and brown folks at an insanely high rate. And Native folks often get left out of the conversation because other states don't have like similar population breakdowns, where we kind of got away with it for a really long time. I think about like the folks that I work with and the folks that I worked with at SOAR. It's very rare now, and it was very rare then, that if I worked with somebody who was Native, that they didn't serve time incarcerated. Very, very rare. And like we talked about before, just the process of incarceration is so insanely traumatizing that it scars people, that emotional wound. So yeah, Minnesota.
So just a little more kind of data. I just looked up. Minnesota's Native population is 1.1% of the entire state. I used to work primarily with women as a probation officer for years. The Department of Corrections Shakopee Prison is the only women's prison in Minnesota. And anytime I've ever looked up their numbers and their disparity numbers, Native women make up anywhere between 20 and 25% of their incarcerated population, if that gives some sort of an idea.
Thank you very much. That was a good question, whoever wrote that. I appreciate that. So we have about 3 more questions left. So if you do come up with any more questions, definitely try to find some of our volunteers, and then they will come up and bring it to us. So I think technically even though someone from the panel could answer this one, this question might be a bit more for Jason, since it was about his presentation. Wherever he went, he disappeared. Over there. Okay. I'll say it loud enough so you can hear me. So it says the statistics on recidivism show an increase, and it's underlined, increase in rates from the 68% with incarceration 3 years up to 73% after 5 to 7 years, plus somewhere less than 83% after 7 to 8 years. And then their question was, why the increase rather than a decrease?
Statistics. So the people who get caught in year 1, those results are also included in year 2 and year 3 and year 4. So every year you add on, like a person got released, you say how they do it 3 years in, how they do it 5 years in. As you're doing that count for a group, the people who got caught 3 years in are also in the people that got caught 5 years in. So it can only go up. It's just a statistics thing. It's not that people go back to prison at a higher rate 5 years out. They actually go back to prison at a higher rate 1 year out. But the way statistics works in this recidivism count, it does look like it's worse for you the longer you stay out. But what they're saying is that as a whole, by the time you get to 8 years out, like 80% of the people who served, and again, you got to look how long they served. If you serve less than a year, your recidivism risk is less. If you go 20 years, your recidivism risk goes up. So they're generalizing and averaging these things out. But if you go to jail and you serve 10 years, you have an 80% chance of going back in the next 10 years. But after that, your percentage goes down to 8, 9%, which is like the general population's chance of going to prison today. Everybody has about an 8 or 9% chance of going to prison today. Once people are out about 8 or 9 years from release, they're back down to that same thing. So hopefully that makes sense with that.
All right, thank you, Jason. All right, so this is another housing question, and this one asks, where might people coming out of incarceration be housed? And do you have any ideas? Question mark.
With unlimited money? Yes.
So I supervise the team of caseworkers who are tasked with reentry planning for the folks that are leaving NERC. Everyone who leaves NERC who is willing to work with my team, which is almost everybody, comes out with a plan. And they leave with a sheet of paper that has every appointment and every doctor and every place that they're going on the plan, including where they're gonna stay. And right now, for a lot of folks, they're gonna be leaving to go to residential treatment placements, which is not long-term housing. They are leaving for board and lodges, which is supportive, but not long-term housing. We have other folks who are lucky enough to still have their own place to go back to, or family or friends that they can go back to. When we're looking at kind of the short-term folks that NERC is working with, we have a much quicker turnover, especially than we ever have before. So we're really looking at kind of one of the things that brings people back and skews those statistics is a violation of probation or a violation of parole. So it's not necessarily a new offense. They didn't commit a new crime. They broke one of these rules that the judge said they had to follow in this time. So they're coming back for a short timeout and like a reset. But really, the housing gamut is open, from staying at the Chum in the shelter to having a home residence to go back to. So there isn't any one place that people are going.
That is a question that I ask on when I do an intake, is, where will you be going when you leave here? And I can tell you it's less than 2%, out of the 7 years I've been doing this, less than 2% have an actual home to go to with like a family, friend, or loved one. Probably less than 2%.
That was another good question. So I do have another housing question here as well. So this one says, panelists spoke about the challenge of finding housing for people who have a record. Could you say more about the importance of housing for a person's reentry? And are there examples of programs in Duluth or elsewhere that help ex-offenders be successful in housing?
I can speak like I work only with folks who use drugs and or alcohol. So I can speak to that when it comes to folks coming out of incarceration and then the issues with housing when they already have a substance use disorder. One of the things that is unique to Duluth is that it's real cold a lot of the time. And it is very, very hard to stay sober when you don't have a place to live, which I see happen time and time and time again. And it seems to be happening more often. It happened twice this year where someone got out of long-term incarceration and was dead within a week of an opioid overdose. And both of those people were outside when they died. So far this year, of all of the opioid overdoses, less than half of them have occurred in a house. They occur outside, they occur in gas station bathrooms, they occur at the library. They occur in a lot of other places because people usually don't have a place to live when they are using opioids. So I think that's the challenge that's unique to folks who have substance use disorder and involvement in the criminal justice system. Not to say that everyone that's in the criminal justice system also has substance use disorder.
I can get it back. No one has anything? That is a very good question and a very important one as well. Let's see. I have a few left, trying to figure out timing. Okay, so I think most, if not all of you, spoke about the, I guess, uniqueness of Duluth with the collaboration and then the actual infrastructure that we have with, most of the organizations and agencies being connected. So, actually I have no idea what I meant at the end of that sentence, but I'm gonna get to it and we're gonna figure it out, so. Let's see, I can come up with that on the spot then. So with the collaboration that we do have and all that we can do, is there anything that we're missing out on? So out of everything that we do as, the multitude of people and agencies, are there things that we're missing out on still that, or I guess, is needed?
Allowing the person that we're talking about to be a part of the plan. A lot of times when we're talking about justice impacted folks, it's other people telling them what to do and telling them where to go and who they're going to meet with, and you are allowed to do this. And including them in that decision making, allowing them to have some autonomy and choice is a huge piece of what's going to allow people to be successful because they feel like it's theirs and they get some ownership of what's happening. None of us like being told what to do. And most of us, especially as adults, don't want someone else telling us what to do because we've earned the right to make choices. And we need to allow people to be part of that even when they're justice impacted.
If I could just speak to the collaboration bit, because I think it also, I love Duluth so much. And I think about the thing that we're missing, what's the piece that's missing? And I'm trying to go through, do we have housing first experts in Duluth? Yep. Do we have harm reduction experts? Yep. Do we have reentry experts? Yep. Do we have substance use folks? Yep. We have all of these experts that live here. We have people that live in Duluth that are subject matter experts that speak nationally about these topics. Everyone that has the answer is already here, It's just getting to the point, like, and I feel like we're at that tipping point. It's just getting to the point to give those experts the resources to fix the problem. And once we have the resources, all of the expertise that's already here will get it done. Like, I feel like we're just like a little hub of experts. Here, everyone's here. Like harm reduction sister, Sue Purchase. She's a national recognized expert in harm reduction, and she lives right here in Duluth. Like, we have everyone at the table. It's just getting the resources to be able to fix it.
I think one of the things that when I see somebody come into our office, one, I can tell how newly out they are by what they're wearing, right? But one of the first things that I usually say to somebody is, welcome home. And they often have a weird look on their face when I say that, right? Because we both know that that's not their home, right? But in a general sense, that's like welcome home. But I think that as neighbors and as community members, we need to be better about saying, welcome home.
All right, so are there any other questions out there? It seems that I have run out. Nobody. Not a single question. Oh, I do have one.
Does everyone that leaves, at least from your experience in NERC, have to have a plan for housing, or are people just sent on their way with a token amount of money and said, you're on your own?
They are not required to have a plan. I asked my team to give me kind of a ballpark number of folks that have left in the last year that had zero place to go. And it was maybe 30.
Out of how many?
I wish I could tell you. I could tell you that we've got 144 beds at any given time that could be filled. But in a calendar year, roughly 30. And some of those folks, they might not be ready to engage in that planning yet. Or they're not ready to share their story yet. So I can't be certain that they didn't have a place they were going. Just, we don't have it on paper that they did. I'm going to assume that they did not, because that's what I know. But it's a very small number who leave our facility that don't have somewhere that they're headed. Now, if we loop in the St. Louis County Jail, because their turnover is significantly faster than ours. To come to NERC, people have to qualify to be there. There's a screening process depending on offenses and history and escape risk and all kinds of things. And I'm actually tasked with that. I screen people to have the option of coming and serving their time with us. Whereas the St. Louis County Jail takes in everybody, and then they're turning people back out. So I know that most of the people who are staying at Chum have either recently or immediately had some sort of justice involvement.
I did hear in that question, or do they leave with a token amount of money? And I want to correct maybe a misunderstanding. Nobody leaves any facility with a quote-unquote token amount of money. The system doesn't give you any money when you leave. You either had money when you came in and you have some left, or you were maybe able to earn a very, very, very tiny wage while you were inside. But when people are leaving, they're only leaving with what they had when they came in or what they've been able to earn while they were gone. The system doesn't give them any money to sort of segue back into our community. Maybe that's an answer, right? Maybe some of the money that we're doing community safety, when we're thinking about landlord mitigation funds, can we not have a pot of money that every person leaving a facility has a startup fund? That's just one way of thinking about things. Like, we've never thought about giving people money. Why would we give those people money, right? But what we want to do is we want to create citizens that are going to come back to our community that we're not afraid to have as neighbors. And how do we do that? How do we help them bridge that gap? So honestly, that whole, the comment of like the token amount of money sort of just triggered that thought, like why, maybe we should give people a token amount of money. Maybe we should give them a starting fund. I don't know. I think we have a lot of smart people in our community, and I think we have a lot of brain power that can really find some solutions. Let's get to work.
All right, thank you for that question. Yes.
I'm just wondering what the token amount of money would do if they don't have a place. Getting a place to live right now is very difficult, and I don't know how much that token amount of money would be, but you're talking first month rent, last month's rent, deposit, sometimes depending on your record, 2 to 3 months rent for that deposit. So that right there can be anywhere from 2 to 4 months worth of rent in order to move in. So I'm just wondering, what you'd be even thinking about with a token amount of money. I mean, I don't mean that you shouldn't be thinking about that, but I mean, if you're going to mention it, what are you looking at?
And that brings me back to that collaboration piece. If there's a thing that we're missing, it's funding. Every avenue is looking for funding. We do have some resources in the community. I don't know how much funding they have post-COVID that can help with some of those things. But when you've got a ton of people who are looking and that number doesn't change, that number goes quickly. So that is one of the biggest challenges that affects all of us, is looking for resources to even keep the programming that we can offer going, let alone adding more. So that is another piece, I think, as a community, that even just the awareness of the fact that all of these things have to come from somewhere, and we have to be able to sustain them for us to keep offering the services we have.
So I just want to add to that, because I think we're onto something as a community. One of the things I always think we need to try to convince our decision makers is the economics part of it, because they're always saying how much does it cost. And if what you say is correct in that we know what we need to do, what we need to be able to do is show that in the long run, it's going to save us as a community financially. I mean, of course we want the hard part there, which is really, really important, but when it comes to the hardcore decision making, to be able to say, this is good for the community because in the long run it's going to create jobs and this and that, but it's also going to save on the other end of police, fire, emergency. And we kind of know it inside, but if we could have resources that show where people have studied this and have some numbers to start to share with our community, it might help us move towards some of these decisions.
I constantly yell into the sky, why don't fiscal conservatives advocate for prison reform? Because it's so true. But I can tell you that Career Solutions did a cost-benefit analysis about re-entry. So that data does exist specific to Duluth, and I'm sure they're willing to share.
Thank you very much. I mean, I wouldn't suggest it, but go ahead.
The gate fee is kind of what we're talking about, where people are released with some money. And the idea would be a check, like when you walk out the door, you have access to a fund of money to help with some of these resources. Right now, that fund is you guys, the community. So the Department of Corrections is saying, we're here to correct people, but they're really there to punish people and then send them on their way and say good luck. So one of the theories is that there would be this, because you went in the Department of Corrections, if they really want to change things, they could do things in the community to make things available. So my answer would be, well, how much does it cost for first month, last month, and the deposit? Less than $70,000 a year, which is what we paid incarcerated people. Much less than $70 grand, probably $200 to $2,500 to get somebody into a housing, to keep them off of $70,000 a year tax, benefit or tax weight for each person in incarceration. So it's quite a bit of savings if we can get people into housing, because then they're going to start getting a job. Then they're going to be paying into a fund. Your streets are going to be in better shape. Your plows are going to be faster, and everything else works in town better because there's more people spending tax dollars. So it's an investment in the community once we can get over the stigma of those people getting something.
All right. Well. I was gonna say we need to hire her. That's what to do. Just have our own personal cheerleaders. So I want to first thank everyone for coming out. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you for our saviors for hosting us and giving us this opportunity to come out, listen, and learn. I want to, read this, quote or observation that someone in the audience wrote. I was going to use it as a general question, but I figured it'd go better at the end, even though I didn't read it, so we're going to all figure out how this sounds now. So someone wrote, this is obviously not a question, although I really wanted to express appreciation regarding focusing on individuals and their strengths, because highlighting a strength builds self-esteem and our ability to prosper. So
That was mine.
that was yours. That was amazing. So I felt like it would work amazingly at the end. I don't know how everyone else felt about that. All right, what else do we have? So we have a little bit of time if the panelists want to give their final thoughts on the night. That's up if you want to use it or not. All right. So before everyone leaves, I want to remind people, one, if you haven't signed the sign-in sheet over here at the front table, please go and do so. If you want to know any more information about stepping on up, we have our QR code, but then also Joel and I and our intern Sam are here if you have any other questions. And what else do we have? Next week, we do have our next presentation, our education committee, or our education series, and that one is focused on youth shelter, but I cannot give you the exact name of that right now, and I'm sorry. So, that one will be at Peace Church, yes.
Helping Youth Thrive.
Helping Youth Thrive at Peace Church, same time next week, 6 p.m. on Thursday. So, was there anything else I needed for that? No? All right, well, I think we have some more cookies left as well if people want to take those. And thank you.